The wind screamed like a banshee across the desolate stretch of Route 47, hurling sheets of snow that swallowed the world in white. In the heart of a Montana winter, where the cold didn't just bite but clawed into your bones, James Carter gripped the steering wheel of his battered Chevy truck, his knuckles pale against the cracked leather. The heater sputtered, coughing out tepid air that barely dented the frost creeping across the windshield. In the rearview mirror, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, slept soundly in the back seat, her small frame curled beneath a patchy fleece blanket. Her breath fogged the window beside her, a fragile rhythm in the chaos of the storm. James didn't know that a single act of kindness was about to upend his life forever. But on this night, with the world collapsing into ice and shadow, he was about to meet a stranger who'd change everything. The storm had descended without mercy, a whiteout that turned the familiar road into a treacherous void. James, 35, was no stranger to Montana's winters, but this one felt different, vicious, almost personal. The radio crackled with a weather alert. Blizzard conditions. Visibility near zero. Travel only if absolutely necessary. He turned the knob down, silencing the warning. It was too late to turn back. Home was 20 miles ahead, a modest one-story house at the end of a gravel road, where a can of soup and a flickering porch light waited. His shoulders ached from a 12-hour shift at the garage, crawling under rusted chassis and wrestling with transmissions others had long given up on. The faint smell of grease and motor oil clung to his coveralls, a second skin he couldn't shed. All he wanted was to get Lily home, warm her up, maybe find a piece of cornbread in the pantry if he hadn't forgotten milk again. Lily stirred in her sleep, her long lashes, her mother's lashes fluttering against her cheeks. Anna had been gone 3 years, taken by a cancer that moved faster than the doctor's promises. James had learned to carry the grief quietly, like a weight he'd strapped to his chest. Lily was his anchor, his reason to keep moving. Her small chest rose and fell, oblivious to the storm's fury. He adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes softening for a moment before snapping back to the road. The headlights flickered, struggling to pierce the swirling snow. Tire tracks vanished under fresh powder as soon as they formed. The world was empty, save for the dark silhouettes of pine trees bending under the wind's assault. Then, a pulse of orange caught his eye, a faint, desperate blink on the roadside. Hazard lights. James's stomach tightened. He eased off the gas, the truck's tires slipping slightly on the slick asphalt as he pulled over. A black Range Rover sat crooked in a snowbank, its rear tires half buried, engine silent. The storm roared around it, but the vehicle looked abandoned, a ghost in the whiteout. As he drew closer, he saw the passenger window cracked open a few inches, just enough to let air in or maybe to cry for help. His mind raced. Lily was in the truck, vulnerable. The gas gauge hovered near empty, and every minute out here burned. Fuel they couldn't spare. He could keep driving, pretend he hadn't seen it. No one would know, but James wasn't wired that way. He'd grown up in a family that fixed things, cars, homes, people, because it was right, not because it was easy. A memory flickered. Years ago, he'd stopped to help a stranded driver, only to be met with suspicion, a hand on a wallet, a glance at his skin. The sting of it lingered. Helping strangers wasn't always safe, not for a black man in a place like Clearbrook, where trust could be as scarce as sunlight in January. Still, he couldn't drive on. Not when someone might generally be dying out there. He shifted the truck into park, reached back to tug Lily's blanket higher over her shoulders. She murmured something soft, dream-soaked. "Stay warm, baby girl," he whispered, then stepped out into the storm. The cold hit like a fist, slamming through his worn jacket, stinging his cheeks. Snow pelted his face, soaking his sleeves in seconds. He trudged to the Range Rover, his boots crunching through the drifts, and pounded on the driver's window. "Hey, anyone in there?" No response. He cupped his hands against the glass, peering inside. A woman sat slumped over the steering wheel, head tilted forward, unmoving. Her skin was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue. "Jesus," James muttered, his breath clouding in the air. He tested the door locked. The cracked window was his only way in. Time was slipping away. The cold was a thief, and it didn't wait. He sprinted back to the truck, the wind shoving him sideways, and grabbed a crowbar from under the driver's seat, a tool he kept for emergencies, not sentiment. Lily stirred again, one eye fluttering open. "Daddy?" She mumbled. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Go back to sleep." He was back at the Range Rover in moments, the crowbar's flat end slipping into the window's gap. His hands, rough from years of wrench turning, moved with practiced ease. The lock gave way with a soft click, and the door swung open. The woman's body tilted sideways, limp, ice cold. James caught her before she fell, her weight heavier than he'd expected, like the storm itself had settled into her bones. Her breath was shallow, barely a whisper. He didn't stop to think, didn't ask who she was or why she was out here. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, and half ran, half stumbled back to the truck. The snow came in sheets, blinding, relentless, as if the world wanted to erase them both. Inside the cab, James adjusted the passenger seat, laying the woman down as gently as he could. He stripped off his own coat, threadbare but warm, and draped it over her, tucking it around her shoulders. The heater whined, useless against the cold seeping through the windows, but he cranked it to max anyway. His heart pounded, eyes flicking from the road ahead to the fragile stranger beside him, then to Lily, who'd sat up now, wide-eyed, in the back seat. "Daddy, who's that?" Lily's voice was small, curious, not scared. James pressed a hand to the woman's forehead, icy, clammy then to her wrist, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. "Someone who needs help?" he said quietly, his voice low and even, like he was convincing himself as much as her. He pulled back onto the road, the truck's tires groaning against the ice. The storm closed in tighter, a white shroud that swallowed the world. But James kept driving, one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near the stranger, as if he could will her to keep breathing. The road to Clearbrook stretched on, endless and unforgiving. James's mind churned. The gas needle ticked lower, a silent threat. He didn't know how long the truck could hold out, or if the woman would wake up. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she'd been foolish enough to drive into a blizzard like this. All he knew was the weight of her in his arms, the trust in Lily's eyes, and the stubborn pull in his gut that said leaving her wasn't an option. The pines loomed like sentinels, their branches heavy with snow, and the headlights carved a frail path through the dark. Home was out there, somewhere, and for now, that was enough. The truck groaned up the icy hill, its tires clawing for traction as the storm raged on, a relentless beast outside the fogged-up windows. James Carter's breath clouded in the cab, his eyes flicking between the snow-choked road and the unconscious woman slumped in the passenger seat. Beth Harper's face was still pale, her lips less blue but trembling, wrapped in his warm work coat. In the back, Lily, his 6-year-old daughter, sat quietly, clutching her star-patterned blanket, her wide eyes fixed on the stranger. The world outside was a white void, but inside the truck, a fragile warmth held them together. James didn't know it yet, but this night was weaving a thread that would bind their lives in ways he couldn't imagine. The gravel road to their home appeared like a ghost through the snow, marked by barren trees that stood like silent sentinels. The house itself was a humble one-story structure, its rusted tin roof sagging under the weight of winter, the porch light flickering as the wind battered it. James pulled the truck as close to the door as he could, leaving the engine running to keep the heat alive. He glanced at Beth, her chest rising faintly, then at Lily. "Stay here for a sec, baby girl," he said softly, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut. Lily nodded, pulling her blanket tighter. He stepped into the storm, the cold slicing through his thin shirt like a blade. Rounding to the passenger side, he opened the door carefully, the hinges creaking in protest. Beth stirred as he lifted her, her head lolling against his shoulder, a faint murmur escaping her lips. She was lighter now, or maybe he was just numb to the cold, but her weight felt like a promise he hadn't meant to make. He kicked the front door open, the warmth of the house meager but dry rushing to meet them. The air smelled of pine, smoke and old coffee, the walls patched with yellowed newspaper, the floor creaking under his boots. He moved straight to the living room, lowering Beth onto the sagging sofa near the wood-burning stove. The stove was cold, its embers long dead. James knelt, shoving kindling into the grate, his hands moving with the muscle memory of a man who'd stoked 100 fires. The match flared, casting shadows across the room, and soon the wood crackled, sending a faint glow over Beth's still form. He studied her for a moment, her expensive coat, now damp and crumpled, the delicate watch on her wrist, the way her blonde hair clung to her forehead. She didn't belong here, in this house of patched walls and second-hand furniture. But she was here, and she was his responsibility. James worked quickly, his hands steady despite the ache in his bones. He eased off Beth's snow-soaked boots, the leather soft and impractical for a Montana winter. From a basket by the stove, he grabbed a pair of thick wool socks, his mother's, kept for nights like this, and slipped them onto her feet. Quilt his grandmother had sewn, its edges frayed but heavy with warmth, came next, draped over her legs and tucked around her shoulders. He pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, counting the pulse. Slow but stronger now. Hypothermia was a silent killer, one he'd seen claim a hiker years ago in these same mountains. He wouldn't let it take her. Lily slipped into the room, her blanket trailing behind her like a cape. She stood by the sofa, eyes wide, studying Beth with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Is she gonna be okay, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small but clear. James nodded, forcing a calm he didn't fully feel. "She just needs to get warm, sweetheart. Can you grab the thermos from the kitchen table?" Lily darted off, her bare feet pattering on the wooden floor. She returned with a dented red thermos, clutching it like a treasure. James unscrewed the lid, pouring chamomile tea with a touch of honey into a chipped mug. The steam curled upward, a faint promise of life. He lifted Beth's head gently, her skin still clammy, and pressed the mug to her lips. "Come on," he murmured, tilting it slowly. Her throat moved, a reflex more than a choice, but it was enough. A few seconds later, her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of glacier ice blue, sharp and confused. Beth's gaze locked onto James, then darted around the room, taking in the unfamiliar walls, the flickering stove, the little girl hovering nearby. "Where?" Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Clearbrook," James said, his tone low and even, like he was coaxing a skittish animal. "You were passed out in your car. I couldn't leave you there." She blinked, lips parting as if to speak, but exhaustion pulled her back. Her eyes softened, not with recognition, but with something raw relief, maybe, or surrender. "I didn't think," she whispered, then sank against the cushions. Her breath, steadying. James set the mug down, rubbing his hands together to chase the cold from his fingers. He glanced at Lily, who'd edged closer, her blanket now draped over her shoulders like wings. "She's gonna be okay," he repeated, more for Lily than himself, but doubt gnawed at him. The storm hadn't let up. The wind rattled the windows, a reminder that they were still cut off from the world. If Beth's condition worsened, there'd be no hospital run, no ambulance braving this blizzard, and bringing a stranger, a white woman, no less, into his home wasn't without risk. Clearbrook was a small town, and small towns had long memories. He'd learned that the hard way, like the time he'd fixed a neighbor's tractor for free, only to hear whispers about motives at the gas station. Gusts slammed against the house, the windows shuddering in their frames. James tensed, his jaw tightening. The storm wasn't just a threat to Beth. It was a cage, locking them in with no way out. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the woman before him. Her color was returning, a faint flush creeping into her cheeks, but she was still fragile, a thread away from slipping back into danger. Lily stepped forward, clutching her star-patterned blanket. She hesitated, then held it out, her voice proud but shy. "This is mine. It's got stars. It's really warm." Beth's eyes flickered open again, meeting Lily's. A ghost of a smile curved her lips, weak but genuine. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice like a breeze through dry leaves. Lily beamed, laying the blanket across Beth's lap, its bright stars a stark contrast to the quilt's faded patchwork. James watched the exchange, something loosening in his chest. Lily had that effect. Her light could pierce even the heaviest shadows, but he couldn't shake the weight of what he'd done. This woman, whoever she was, wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was in his home, under his roof, her life tethered to his choices. He didn't know her story, but he'd seen enough in her eyes haunted, like she was running from more than just a storm. He stood, brushing sawdust from his jeans, and moved to the stove, adding another log. The fire snapped, casting a warm glow across the room, softening the edges of the patched walls and warm furniture. Beth's breathing steadied, her hands curling around the mug he'd left beside her. Lily settled on the floor, flipping through a dog-eared picture book, or humming a quiet melody in the stillness. James sat across from them, elbows on his knees, watching the woman who'd stumbled into his life. He wasn't a man who trusted easily, not after Anna, not after years of scraping by in a town that sometimes looked at him like an outsider. But something about Beth, lost and broken behind that windshield, had pulled at him, a hook in his gut he couldn't ignore. Lily glanced up, her eyes bright with questions she didn't ask. James offered her a small nod, a silent promise. They'd get through this. Outside, the storm howled, its fury undimmed. But in this small, creaking house, a fragile warmth took root, holding the cold at bay. For now, it was enough. The first light of dawn crept through the frost-glazed windows, painting the living room in shades of gray and gold. The storm had softened, its howl now a low moan, but the world outside remained buried in snow, a silent weight pressing against the small house. James Carter sat by the wood-burning stove, feeding it another log, the crackle of fire a quiet counterpoint to the stillness. Across from him, Beth Harper stirred on the sofa, her face no longer deathly pale but flushed with returning life. The quilt and Lily's star-patterned blanket lay tangled around her, and her hands clutched the chipped mug of tea, now cold. Lily slept curled in an armchair, her picture book splayed open on her lap. The room was warm, but a different kind of tension simmered, one born of strangers sharing space, their stories hovering just out of reach. Beth's eyes fluttered open, clearer now, the glacier blue sharp with awareness. She scanned the room, taking in the patched walls, the photo on the mantel, James holding a baby Lily beside a woman with a tired, radiant smile. Her gaze settled on James, who met it with a nod, his expression unreadable. "Feeling better?" he asked, his voice low, like he didn't want to wake the house. Beth nodded, her throat working as she swallowed. "I think so. Thank you. Her words were fragile, testing the air. She shifted, wincing as her body protested. The ache of the cold still lodged in her bones. This place, Clearbrook. It's your home? Just me and Lily, James said, his tone clipped but not unkind. He stood, brushing soot from his hands, and moved to the kitchen, filling a kettle with water. The simplicity of his answer hung between them, an invitation and a boundary all at once. Beth's fingers tightened around the mug. She wanted to ask more about the woman in the photo, about the life that had carved such quiet strength into this man, but something in his posture stopped her. Instead, she said, I'm Elizabeth Harper, Beth. I wasn't supposed to be out here. My GPS failed and my phone died. I was heading to a lodge, trying to... She trailed off, her eyes distant. Get away. James glanced over his shoulder, the kettle hissing softly. From what? The question wasn't prying, just direct. Like he was sizing up a busted engine, Beth hesitated, her lips parting, then closing. Work, life, everything. She gave a small, bitter laugh. I run Harper Automotive Group. Big company, big problems. I thought a few days in the mountains might fix me. Stupid, I know. James raised an eyebrow, setting the kettle on the stove. Harper Automotive. He'd seen their logo on parts at the garage. A name that meant money, power, glass towers far from Clearbrook's gravel roads. Doesn't sound stupid, he said, surprising himself. Just sounds like you got more than you bargained for. Beth's smile was faint, almost sad. You could say that. She looked at the photo again, then at Lily, still asleep, her curls spilling over the armchair. Your daughter, she's sweet. She didn't have to share her blanket. She's like that, James said, a softness creeping into his voice. He returned with a fresh mug of tea, setting it beside her. Doesn't know a stranger. Yes. It's from her mom, not me. Beth's eyes lingered on the photo. Is she gone? James said, the word heavy but final. 3 years now. He didn't elaborate, and Beth didn't press. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it was full, like the air before a storm breaks. A sharp buzz cut through the quiet James's phone, vibrating on the kitchen counter. He crossed the room, his brow furrowing as he read the caller ID. Pete, his boss at the garage. He answered, keeping his voice low. Yeah, Pete, what's up? The news wasn't good. The garage was bleeding money, and Pete was talking layoffs. You're the best we got, James, but I can't promise anything, he said, his voice gruff with apology. Just wanted you to know. James's jaw tightened, his free hand clenching into a fist. The mortgage, the bills, Lily's school supplies, they were already a tightrope. Losing his job would cut it clean through. He muttered a thanks and hung up, his face a mask as he turned back to Beth. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. Everything okay? She asked, her tone careful. Fine, James lied, forcing a shrug. He wasn't about to unload his problems on a stranger, no matter how grateful she was. But the call had stirred something, a reminder of how close he was to losing everything, how one wrong move could unravel the life he'd built for Lily. A knock at the door startled them both. James frowned, crossing to the window. Through the frost, he saw Tom, a neighbor from down the road, bundled in a parka. James opened the door, the cold rushing in like an uninvited guest. Tom, what's going on? Tom's eyes flicked past James, landing on Beth, then back. Saw your truck last night. Figured you were home. Just checking you're all right in this mess. His tone was friendly, but there was an edge, a question he wasn't asking. Didn't know you had company. James's shoulders stiffened. He knew that tone, the one that came with raised eyebrows and whispered rumors. Found her stranded on 47, he said, keeping his voice even. Couldn't leave her out there. Tom nodded, but his gaze lingered on Beth, who sat up straighter, clutching the quote. Right? Well, roads are still bad. Stay safe. He tipped his hat and trudged back into the snow, leaving James with a sour taste in his mouth. Clearbrook wasn't unkind, but it was small, and small towns noticed things, especially when a black man brought a white woman into his home. Beth caught the shift in James's demeanor. He didn't seem happy to see me, she said, her voice quiet but probing. James shrugged, closing the door. People talk, doesn't matter. But it did, and they both knew it. He busied himself with the stove, avoiding her eyes. Lily woke then, rubbing her eyes and sliding off the armchair. She padded over to Beth, her picture book in hand. Want to see my drawings? She asked, her voice bright, oblivious to the tension. Beth blinked, then smiled, patting the sofa beside her. Lily climbed up, flipping through pages of crayon scribbles, stars, trees. A woman with long hair she called Mommy. She's beautiful, Beth said, her voice softening as she traced a finger over the drawing. You miss her? Lily nodded, her curls bouncing. But Daddy says she's watching us like a star. She pointed to the blanket, now draped over Beth's knees. That's why I like stars. Beth's throat tightened, her eyes meeting James's across the room. He looked away, stirring a pot of oatmeal on the stove, but the moment hung there, a bridge between them. Beth wasn't used to children, to their unguarded honesty, but Lily's warmth was disarming, peeling back layers she'd forgotten she had. James set bowls of oatmeal on the table, the steam curling upward. It's not much, he said, his tone gruff, but it'll warm you up. Beth joined them, her movements slow, and they ate in near silence. The clink of spoons the only sound. The simplicity of it, the worn table, the chipped bowls, Lily's quiet humming felt foreign to Beth, whose life was boardrooms and catered lunches. Yet it was honest, grounding, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd been running from as they ate. Beth's eyes drifted to the mantel, to the photo, then to James's hands, calloused and stained with grease. You've built a good life here, she said, almost to herself. It's real. James snorted softly, not unkindly. Real's one way to put it. But her words landed, stirring something he didn't name. He didn't trust easily, not after years of sideways glances and unpaid bills, but Beth's presence, her gratitude, her quiet respect felt different. Not pity, not judgment, just seeing. Lily finished her oatmeal and tugged at Beth's sleeve. Can you draw with me? She asked, holding out a crayon. Beth hesitated, then took it, her smile tentative but growing. James watched them, the CEO and his daughter, their heads bent over a scrap of paper, and felt a shift, like a door creaking open. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the cold lingered, a reminder of the world waiting beyond these walls. James stepped onto the porch, his breath clouding in the air. He needed to check Beth's Range Rover, get it running before the roads cleared. But as he glanced back through the window, seeing Lily's laughter and Beth's softening edges, he knew this night had changed something. He just didn't know how much. The Montana dawn broke cold and clear, the storm's fury spent, leaving a world draped in heavy silence. Snow blanketed the pines, their branches bowing under the weight, and the air bit at any exposed skin. James Carter stood on the porch of his small house, his breath clouding in sharp puffs, a toolbox slung over one shoulder and a battery charger in hand. Inside, Beth Harper sat with Lily, their laughter a faint hum through the frost-etched window. The Range Rover waited down the road, half frozen where James had found it, a silent challenge he couldn't ignore. Fixing it was more than a task. It was a promise, a way to send Beth back to her world and reclaim the quiet rhythm of his own. But as he trudged through the snow, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like a gear catching where it hadn't before. The Range Rover sat crooked in the snowbank, its sleek black frame dusted with powder, a stranger in this landscape of pines and gravel. James set his tools down, his fingers already stiffening in the cold. He popped the hood, the hinges groaning, and surveyed the engine. It was newer than most he worked on, clean and well-maintained, but the battery was dead, and the alternator looked suspect. He'd seen worse rusted hulks that took days to coax back to life, but this job wasn't about skill. It was about time, and the cold was a relentless clock. He worked methodically, his hands moving with the precision of a man who'd learned his trade from a father who never cut corners. Clean the intake valves, check the spark plugs, test the wiring. Every motion was deliberate, a ritual against the chaos of the night before. A gust tore through the trees, sharp and sudden, and a heavy branch snapped above, crashing to the ground. Inches from James, he stumbled back, heart pounding, the snow exploding around him in a white cloud. For a moment, he stood frozen, the near miss a reminder of how little control he had out here. The cold didn't care about his skill or his daughter waiting at home. He shook it off, his jaw tightening, and returned to the engine, but the unease lingered. As he worked, his glove brushed a folder wedged near the passenger seat, its edge peeking through the cracked window. Curiosity tugged at him, and he glanced inside. A contract, dense with legal jargon, stamped with Harper Automotive Group, and a note about pending investigation. His stomach twisted. Beth wasn't just a stranded driver. She was tied to a world of power and trouble, one that felt a million miles from CLEARBR. OK. James pushed the folder back, his mind churning. He didn't need to know her secrets. She'd be gone soon, back to her glass towers, and he'd be back to his garage, his bills, his Lily. But the contract gnawed at him, a reminder of the gap between their lives. He swapped in a spark plug from his own stash, one he'd meant to save for a paying job, and connected the battery charger. The engine would start. He'd make sure of it. Inside the house, Beth sat cross-legged on the floor with Lily, a deck of worn playing cards spread between them. The fire in the stove snapped, casting a warm glow over the room, softening the edges of the patched walls. Lily giggled, slapping down a card. "Go fish," she declared, her curls bouncing. Beth laughed, a sound that felt foreign to her own ears, and drew a card, her fingers still stiff from the cold, but steadier now. She wasn't used to this children, games, a house that smelled of oatmeal and wood smoke. Her world was conference calls, red-eye flights, and a company teetering on the edge of scandal. But here, with Lily's bright eyes and relentless chatter, she felt something loosen, like a knot unraveling. "You good at this," Beth said, her smile genuine. "You play with your dad a lot?" Lily nodded, stacking her cards. "When? He's not fixing cars. He's the best at it. Mommy said he could make anything run again." Her voice dipped, a shadow crossing her face, but she brightened quickly. "Want to hear a story?" Beth leaned forward, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Always." Lily launched into a tale about her mother, a woman who loved painting. Stars and singing off-key, her words tumbling over each other like a stream. Beth listened, her chest tightening. She'd grown up in a trailer park, scraping by until ambition and luck landed her in a corner office. But she'd forgotten what it felt like to be anchored by love, not obligation. "Your mom sounds amazing," she said softly, her voice catching. "She was," Lily said, then held out a crayon drawing, a woman with yellow hair under a starry sky. "This is her. And that's me and Daddy." Beth traced the drawing, her throat tight. "You're lucky to have him." Lily grinned, then leaned forward, whispering like it was a secret. "You're nice, like a princess." Beth laughed, the sound raw and unguarded. "Not quite, kiddo." But the word lingered, warming her more than the fire. James returned. his boots tracking melted snow across the floor, his face flushed from the cold. He held out Beth's keys, his voice plain. "Should be good now. Battery is charged, alternator's fine. She start." Beth stood, her movements slow, as if reluctant to leave the warmth of the room. She took the keys, her fingers brushing his, and hesitated. "You didn't have to fix it," she said, her voice soft but earnest. "You've done enough." James shrugged, his eyes flicking to the stove. Didn't make sense to leave it broken. His words were simple, but they carried weight. A reflection of a man who fixed what he could in a world that often broke. Beth looked at him, really looked, seeing the lines etched around his eyes, the grease under his nails, the quiet strength that had pulled her from the cold. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice catching. "You don't have to," James replied, turning to stoke the fire, but his shoulders softened, as if her words had landed somewhere deep. Lily ran to Beth, wrapping her small arms around her legs. "Don't go, princess," she said, half laughing, half serious. Beth crouched, pulling Lily into a hug, holding her a moment longer than necessary. The girl's warmth, her trust, was a gift Beth hadn't expected. "You're the brave one, Lily," Beth whispered, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for sharing your stars." She stood, clutching the keys, and glanced at James. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable but steady, a silent acknowledgement of the night they'd shared. Outside, the cold bit at Beth again, sharper now after the house's warmth. She climbed into the Range Rover, the engine humming to life under her fingers, just as James had promised. She sat there, hands on the wheel, her eyes catching his in the rearview mirror. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the cold. Lily at his side, watching her go not expectantly, just present. Beth rolled the window down halfway. "I mean it, James," she called, her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. "I won't forget this." He nodded once, a small gesture that felt like a vow. "Drive safe." Beth lingered one heartbeat longer, then shifted into gear, the tires crunching softly on the snow-packed road. In the mirror, the little house grew smaller, its porch light a fading star in the white expanse. But something in her chest stayed warm, tethered to that moment, to the man who'd saved her without question, to the girl who'd called her a princess. The road ahead was clear, but it felt different now, like it was leading somewhere new. James watched the Range Rover disappear, Lily's hand small and warm in his. The silence of the snow settled around them, heavy but not empty. He didn't know what came next, but as Lily tugged him back inside, her chatter filling the air, he felt the weight of the night shift. They'd done something right, and for now, that was enough. 2 weeks had passed since the blizzard, and Clearbrook was shedding its winter skin. Snow dripped from rooftops, pooling into muddy rivulets along the gravel roads, and the pines stood taller, their branches lighter under a tentative sun. James Carter's life had folded back into its familiar rhythm. Pre-dawn alarms, oil-stained coveralls, and Lily's laughter echoing through their small house as she packed her backpack with crayons and dreams. The extraordinary night with Beth Harbor felt like a fever dream, its edges blurring into the ordinary grind of survival. But in quiet moments, sipping coffee on the porch, watching frost glint like diamonds on the rail, James found himself thinking of her, the woman with frostbitten fingers and haunted eyes, whose name he hadn't known until she was gone. He expected nothing from it. Kindness wasn't a debt to be repaid. So when the envelope arrived, heavy and cream-colored with no return address, it felt like a mistake. James stood by the mailbox, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the snow-speckled ground. His name, James Carter, was written in precise, elegant script, too careful for a bill collector or a junk mailer. He turned the envelope over, his calloused fingers tracing the edges, and tore it open. the paper crisp against his skin. Inside was a letter, handwritten in dark ink, its words unfolding like a confession. "Dear James," it began, "I don't think I'll ever find the right words, but I'll try. That night changed me. You didn't know my name, and still you opened your door. You didn't ask what I did or what I could give you. You just saw someone in need and acted without hesitation, without pride. I don't know many people who would do the same." James's breath caught, his eyes scanning the page. The letter was from Beth Elizabeth Harper, CEO of Harper Automotive Group. She wrote of her world, big buildings, bigger problems, a company teetering under the weight of scandal and ambition. "Lately, I've felt it all drifting away from what matters," she confessed, "until that night. You reminded me what decency looks like when no one's watching, what quiet dignity sounds like. You reminded me of who I used to want to be." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through him, stirring something tight and aching in his chest. Not pain, but recognition. The next page was different, formal, typed on letterhead. A job offer, lead technician and supervisor, at a new Harper Automotive training facility in Helena. The salary was more than James made in 2 years at the garage, with full benefits, flexible hours for single parents, and relocation support. It wasn't charity, the letter emphasized, but an opportunity, a chance to build something new. Behind it, a final sheet, a payment receipt, his mortgage cleared. The household, stubborn, patched with love and time, was now his, free of the final notices that had haunted his mailbox for years. No more late-night calculations. No more choosing between groceries and heat. James sat on the porch steps, the letter crinkling in his hands, the world tilting gently around him. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and violet, and the air was still, as if holding its breath. He read the letter again, then a third time, searching for a catch, a string attached. He'd never been handed anything without a cost knot in Clearbrook. Not in a life where every dollar was earned with sweat and grease. The job was real, the numbers undeniable, but doubt gnawed at him. Was this pity? A rich woman's way of easing her guilt? He thought of Beth's eyes that night, raw and grateful, and wondered if he'd misread her. Another thought crept in, sharper, uglier. Pete, his boss at the garage, had called again that morning, his voice heavy with bad news. The garage was closing, and James's job was gone. "You're family, man," Pete had said, "but there's nothing I can do." The timing of Beth's letter felt like fate or a trap. Accepting it meant leaving Clearbrook, the only home Lily had ever known, the town where Anna's memory lingered in every corner. It meant stepping into Beth's world, a place of glass and steel where he might not belong. And then there was Pete's warning, half joking but pointed. "You take a fancy job. Folks around here might call you a sellout." Clearbrook didn't take kindly to those who left, especially not for a big city offer from an outsider. James's fingers tightened around the letter, the paper crumpling at the edges. He thought of Lily, of the school supplies he couldn't afford, the winter coat she'd outgrown. He thought of the house, now his, a weight lifted but a new one settling in its place. The job wasn't just a paycheck. It was a future, a chance to give Lily more than he'd ever had. But it came with a cost, his pride, his roots, the quiet life he'd fought to hold together. The screen door creaked, and Lily ran out, barefoot. Despite the chill, her curls wild, a stuffed bear dangling from her hand. "Daddy," she called, then stopped, her face scrunching. "You okay?" Her eyes, bright and searching, caught the letter. The tension in his shoulders. James opened his arms, and she climbed into his lap, her warmth grounding him. He held her close, the letter still in one hand, and felt the ache in his throat. "Yeah, baby girl," he said, his voice low but certain. "I'm okay." "You crying?" Lily asked, tilting her head, her bare pressed against his chest. He pulled back, meeting her gaze, his eyes glassy but steady. Maybe a little, he admitted, a rare crack in his armor. Sometimes, when you do something kind, not for thanks, not for show, just because it's right, it finds its way back to you, bigger than you ever imagined. Lily blinked, quiet for a moment, then smiled. Like magic? James's lips curved, the ache easing, like the real kind. He hugged her tighter, the letter crinkling between them, and looked out at the horizon, the sky burning with color. The decision wasn't made, not yet, but the weight of it felt lighter with Lily in his arms. That night, James sat at the kitchen table, a single bulb casting shadows on the patched walls. He pulled out a sheet of paper, his pen hovering, then wrote, "Beth, you didn't owe me anything, but you gave me everything. Thank you." The words were simple like him, but they carried the truth. He sealed the letter, his hand steady, and set it aside. He didn't know if he'd take the job, didn't know what Helena held, but he knew one thing. Beth had seen him not as a struggling mechanic, not as a man carrying too much, but as someone who'd changed her course. And that was enough to make him consider changing his dot miles away. In a glass tower overlooking a city skyline, Beth stood by her office window, her fingers tracing the edge of a folded note she'd written but hadn't sent. Her desk was piled with reports, the scandal at Harper Automotive still looming, but her mind was elsewhere, on a small house, a star-patterned blanket, a man who'd reminded her what integrity looked like. She tucked the note into her coat pocket, her decision made. She'd visit Helena, see the new facility, and maybe, just maybe, see James again. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, a bridge between two lives that weren't done crossing. The Helena sun hung low, painting the Montana sky in hues of amber and rose, a warmth that felt like a promise after months of winter's grip. James Carter stood outside the new Harper Automotive training facility, a sleek building of glass and steel that seemed out of place among the rugged hills. His coveralls were gone, replaced by a pressed shirt and jeans, the kind of outfit he hadn't worn since Anna's funeral. Beside him, Lily, now 7, bounced on her toes, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a crayon drawing clutched in her hand. They'd moved to Helena a month ago, trading Clearbrook's gravel roads for a small apartment with fresh paint and a view of the mountains. The job lead technician and supervisor had been a leap, but James had taken it, driven by Lily's future and a quiet hope he couldn't name. Today was the facility's opening, and Beth Harper was coming. The thought stirred something in James, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty, like standing on a bridge not yet crossed. Inside, the facility buzzed with activity. Technicians testing, diagnostic equipment, executives mingling with local officials, the air shot with the scent of new paint and polished metal. James moved through the crowd, his presence steady but unassuming, directing his team with the same quiet competence he'd shown in Clearbrook's garage. But not everyone welcomed him. A senior technician, a man named Carl with a handshake too firm, had muttered about outsiders getting fancy jobs. James had met the comment with a level gaze, his voice calm but steel-edged. "I fix cars. Same as you. Let's get to work." The tension lingered, a reminder that trust was earned, not given, even in a new city. But James was used to proving himself, and he had Lily to anchor him. Lily tugged at his hand, her eyes bright with excitement. "Is the princess coming, Daddy?" she asked, her drawing a swirl of stars and a woman with yellow hair crinkling in her grip. James smiled, ruffling her curls. "Her name's Beth, baby girl. And yeah, she's coming." He didn't know what to expect. Beth's letter had changed everything. The job, the paid-off house, the chance to breathe without the weight of bills. But it hadn't promised a reunion. His own letter, simple and heartfelt, had been a thank you, not a request. Yet here they were, their paths converging again. And the thought made his chest tighten. Beth arrived as the ceremony began, stepping out of a sleek sedan, her tailored coat a contrast to the snow-dusted jacket she'd worn that night. She wasn't the CEO today. Not fully. Her smile was too warm, her eyes too searching. She spotted James across the crowd, and for a moment, the noise faded, the distance between them shrinking to the width of a small living room in Clearbrook. She approached, her steps deliberate, and extended a hand. "James," she said, her voice soft but clear. "It's good to see you." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle, and nodded. "You too, Beth." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of that night, the storm, the fire, the stars on Lily's blanket. Lily didn't wait for introductions. She thrust her drawing forward, beaming. "I made this for you. It's you in the snow, but you're not cold anymore." The paper showed a woman under a starry sky, a truck in the background, and 3 figures holding hands. Beth crouched, her eyes glistening as she studied the drawing. "Lily, this is beautiful," she said, her voice catching. "You remembered." "The stars." She hugged the girl, a quick, fierce embrace, and stood, clutching the drawing like a treasure. "Thank you, sweetheart." James watched, his throat tight. Lily had a way of cutting through walls, of making strangers feel like family. He and Beth moved to a quieter corner, a ceremony's hum fading behind them. "You didn't have to." "Come," he said, his tone half question, half statement. Beth's smile was small but steady. "I wanted to. This facility, it's a new start for Harper Automotive. Cleaner, honest. I'm trying to make it right, James, because of you." She paused, her eyes searching his. "You showed me what matters. Not power, not money, just doing what's right." Jane shifted, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would." "No," Beth said firmly. "Not anyone." She reached into her coat, pulling out a folded note, his letter, the one that read, "You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me everything." "This kept me going," she said. "When the board pushed back, when the headlines got ugly, read it. You reminded me who I could be." James looked away, the weight of her words settling into him. He'd never seen himself as a catalyst, just a man trying to keep his daughter safe. But Beth's gratitude, her presence here, made him feel seen in a way he hadn't since Anna. "You're doing the work," he said finally. "That's what counts." They talked longer, their words weaving a thread between Clearbrook and Helena. Beth spoke of her reforms firing corrupt executives, settling the scandal, rebuilding trust. James shared pieces of his new life. Lily's school, the apartment with a balcony, the team he was shaping. There was no promise in their words, no vow of friendship or more, but there was understanding, a bridge built by a single night in a storm. Lily ran up, her backpack bouncing. "Can Beth come visit us?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. James chuckled, glancing at Beth. "That's up to her, baby girl." Beth smiled, her hand resting on Lily's shoulder. "I'd like that," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I'm in Helena for a while. Maybe we can get coffee or—" She trailed off, her smile turning playful. "Or play Go Fish." Lily clapped, and James felt something settle, a quiet certainty that this wasn't the end. Beth left soon after, her sedan pulling away, but she turned back, waving at Lily, who waved her drawing like a flag. James watched her go, his arm around Lily, the Montana sky stretching wide above them. The future was uncertain, but it was brighter, painted in colors he hadn't dared imagine. As they walked home, Lily chattered about her drawing, and James thought of the storm, the house, the letter. Kindness, he realized, wasn't just a moment. It was a ripple, touching lives far beyond its source. He'd saved Beth, and she'd saved him, not with money or jobs, but with the reminder that decency could change the world, one choice at a time. This story, like all great stories, carries a lesson. Kindness, given freely, can bridge divides of race, class, or circumstance and spark transformations we never expect. James, Beth, and Lily remind us that in our darkest moments, a single act of compassion can light the way. Their bridge, built in a storm, stands as a testament to the power of seeing each other truly as human. At Legacy Stories, we believe in sharing tales that inspire, that remind us of the good we can do. Join us, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and start your day with stories that warm the heart and lift the soul. Together, let's keep building bridges.